Hello, podcast family. Hope you guys are having a great day. I'm your host, Rocky Roark, and today I have an amazing guest who is someone I have known for quite a while now and have admired his work extensively. He is the head honcho of Deadbolt Design, Mr. Kyle Van Cleave. Thank you so much for jumping on here, Kyle.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Excited to chat with you today.
Me too. Yeah, so I really appreciate this. Me and Kyle, how many years now have we kind of known each other?
Going on like 10, I think. I mean, in one capacity or another is you can, it's like the digital pen pal age, I guess. So I would say
Exactly,
about
right?
almost 10 years.
Yeah. And I mean I've always loved the work that you've, kind of produced and everything like that. But for of those who are tuning in and everything who don't know who you are, why don't you share a little bit about yourself and about Deadbolt Design?
Sure. First off, how dare you not know who I am?
The
How
audacity.
dare you not know? That's a travesty, and it's un-American. No, um, I'm Kyle. Obviously, as Rocky said, my wife Ash and I run Deadbolt Design, formerly Wild Giant Studio. I've been designing professionally for over 10 years now. I'm from Oregon, rural Eastern Oregon, in a town called the Dalles. So there are places other than Portland in Oregon for the uninitiated. And yeah, I mean, it's just we live a bright green lifestyle here at Deadbolt, and we enjoy what we do and having fun doing it. So nothing crazy with what we got going on over here, but yeah, I mean, we put out a fun image, and I think it really is authentic to who we are. So if you do follow us or do know my work or follow me on any social medias, then this interview may not come as any kind of surprise to you, at least in tone and content. So
Oh yeah, it's like as soon as he jumped on this call and everything, I saw his background. I'm like, oh my god, this is just perfect. The only thing you're missing is having like dark walls or something like that to give the atmosphere. Is that
I,
coming?
it's well, behind my desk it's bluish gray. It was supposed to just be dark gray, but it's like a bluish gray background. But I
Mhm.
would I would have painted it like a close to black, but I don't think the landlord of our studio would have appreciated that much.
Oh yeah, my previous studio in San Diego, I painted it the same color that this background is behind me, and the landlord did not like how dark it was. Especially luckily in California because we lived there for 5 years. He had to repaint it. I didn't have to,
Yeah,
and so it was definitely a pain in the butt
yeah.
to paint over for sure. So let's jump in here. I've got like a list of questions. I'm gonna be jumping all over the place. Um, so one thing that I want to kind of like jump in here is, can you talk about the types of like projects that you guys take on with Deadbolt or yeah,
Yeah,
Deadbolt?
absolutely. I always tell people we're kind of a hybrid design business. I don't know what you want to call it. I guess design service or practice.
Hmm.
But we half of what we do is branding and the things that come along with that. Logo design, systems, identities, all that kind of stuff. And then the other half of what we do is apparel graphics, illustration. And various other things that were used for promotional and merchandise use, spot illustrations,
Hmm.
rarely lettering, sometimes lettering. I wouldn't call myself a letterer, uh, but sometimes that kind of work. But yeah, so it's like 50% on the identity side, and then 50% on the one use promotional side.
Yeah. Yeah, I really love the work that you put out and everything. And you're gonna find this funny, but I actually aspire to get to the point where I'm churning out that much branding work, like I see you putting out. Believe it or not, I most of the work that I do is a lot of like design support, creative direction, and I miss being like hands on in the weeds doing a lot of branding work, and it's something I'm working hard to get back into. But you have this very specific style, when it comes to your work that you produce for your clients and especially for internally. Can you kind of talk about like where you find your inspiration?
Um,
For those of you who are listening instead of watching, Kyle has a great gallery wall of Frankenstein monster pieces, and then he also has a very tall Frankenstein monster right behind him. It's really amazing. Definitely check out this YouTube video if you'd like to see this, because it truly is awesome.
Yeah, that's Boris. My kids
That's
call him
Boris.
my kids call him Bobo. He's the studio intern, and he's awfully quiet, but he's facing the door. So our office has a lobby and then our main studio, and so people walk in the front door and they just get Boris's eye line right there.
Mhm.
And so the first thing I hear when somebody walks in the door is, "Oh." Um, but as far as like inspiration goes for our style, I have found that my style or the way that I do my process or the work comes out has really changed and ebbed and flowed over like the last
Mhm.
decade. I think when we all start out, we find, especially when you're new to it, you find styles that you gravitate towards, or somebody that you look up to, or somebody you're like, man, I aspire to have work like that, and you start to kind of emulate. And over time, there's a difference between emulate and copy, but over time,
Yeah.
you figure out your way of doing that, and then yourself kind of starts to shine through. So I've got a lot of inspiration for the style of work we do. From for the branding side, I think the obvious one that people have compared us to is Aaron Draplin,
Mhm.
a fellow Oregon resident. I tend to fall more into the modernist side of design. So a lot of the old design titans from the pre-digital age. I actually started out in sports design, so there's quite a bit of that left over, I think, in the way
Yeah.
we approach doing logo and brand work. As far as illustration goes, gosh, that list is huge. Hanna-Barbera cartoons is a big one.
Yep.
Classic, Warner Brothers and Disney cartoonists and animators, I would say, are the biggest influence on my illustration style. But more contemporary, I would say you've got Invisible Creature, Brad Woodward, Brave the Woods, Lincoln Design, Davey, Mighty Short. The list is long, but I tend to find inspiration in things that get me excited and
Mhm.
make me want to try a certain style. But at this point in my career, I feel like we're starting to finally get people who are like, we want what you're doing. And so
Exactly.
I think at this point, we feel like we fine tuned um, our style enough that it's like, okay, it's got our signature on it. So, but
Yeah.
inspiration, I got a huge, I literally keep a Pinterest board and a physical thing of inspiration. I've got a ton of books. So,
Yep.
it's always the next thing I find is what I'll be jacked up about. So
Yeah, and it's funny too that you point out Pinterest and everything, because Pinterest is probably one of my favorite ways to keep all my digital inspiration. Um, illustration wise, I probably have, I think, like 17,000 pins of just like illustration
yeah,
inspiration. I just constantly am like adding more to it. Same thing goes for branding, for web design. Now I created one for marketing ads, because I do a lot of marketing ads with my design support projects and things like that. So it's like it's a great tool. And then recently, and tell me if you've had this happen before. I had someone reach out to me for a project, and I asked them, where did you hear about me? And they said Pinterest. And I was like, what?
no, that's definitely not happened. I will say it. I'm rather new to Pinterest. Actually, I think within like the last year, I was on working on a project with a fellow designer, and they kicked me over Pinterest. And I was like, "You use Pinterest for this?" Because to me, I've only ever known it as something my wife used for decorating recipes.
Yeah.
Things to do with the kids, and I was just like, "Yeah, whatever." I'm on it all the time now. Like that algorithm, like it it knows me pretty well at this point. But I have not gotten a job off Pinterest. When I do, that'll be a new one, and it'll be one for the books. So
I think the only other designers that I've heard that have gotten projects off of Pinterest, because I think I heard this on like a YouTube video or interview, was the Hood Sisters, Hoodspa,
yeah,
which totally makes sense
oh yeah,
for like the amount of their work that I see popping up on there. It's insane.
yeah.
But
They have a definite style that I think. actually fits well for Pinterest because
Yeah.
it's not overly feminine, it's not overly masculine. It fits an era kind of look. Like it's some of their work could actually I've actually seen on Pinterest has actually been, I think, mistaken for like retro
Mhm.
advertisement pieces. So
Yeah.
yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah. I'm curious though, and this is kind of like as a segue, is where do you end up getting a lot of your work?
Instagram,
Really?
surprisingly. Well, I would say half of I can't use half. I mean, if I knew the data, if I cared to keep it, I would tell you. A big portion comes from Instagram, but a lot of times what happens is we get an instant message through Instagram, and then we redirect them to our website so they can
Mhm.
fill out a form. Uh, but the other big portion is our longtime client, Matt Vincent, who owns Not Dead Yet brand and
Mhm.
quite a few things. He's got his hands in a lot within the fitness industry and the health industry. Um, he's got a lot of friends, and that web and those vines have woven, pretty well, and have at least given our studio some weight when we reach out to people within those sectors. So a
Yeah.
lot of that is due to relationship building with existing clients. Um, I remember asking that question when I was young, like, how do you get clients? How do you find people and stuff? And like for me, the best thing to do is I've just been getting, it's repeat clients, but also that referral clientele.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, referrals. It's actually funny too because I was talking to Ben Burns from the future last night, and we were talking about referrals, and he referred to it as referrals are like the icing on the cake,
hmm
but
yeah,
the full cake is just networking in
yeah,
general, like networking with people, making connections.
yeah,
That's what ends up leading to so much more
yeah.
work.
I feel like for us, I'm I always tell people I'm an extroverted introvert. Like I kind of use being social and personable as kind of a defense. Like you're not
Mhm.
gonna see me like willingly going out in a big group of like 10 people to go have a night of drinking. Like it's just not my thing.
Yeah.
Um, but I've always felt like, and maybe because I grew up in the public with my dad being a small town mayor for a long time, and working retail as my first jobs. But I've always felt like, I like to pick up the phone and call somebody if I want to meet somebody or I want to like reach out, like I'm going to reach out. I'm going to find a way to do it.
Mhm.
Matt Vincent, who I mentioned, I actually met him at the Portland Highland Games. I had followed him on YouTube. I had no intention of working with him or making a business relationship. I was just inspired by what he was putting out. Knew he was
Yeah.
going to be heard on his podcast with Stone Cold Steve Austin of all people, that he was going to be in Portland, and I was like, well, I'm already going to that event. He's going to be there. I'm going to make this happen.
Yeah.
And it's just an organic thing. So I really feel like networking and connections, even if it's outside of your industry, if you have something to offer, and I'll put it, I've said this before. I like to put our studio in a position where we are in the room when we're not present. I want to be on somebody's mind when a conversation comes up that we fit for. And I always tell people that, like, you don't have to go out and sell all the time if you can be on the mind or in the ear of the right people at the right time. And so I feel like, making connections in different industries and stuff that were organic and authentic has led to a lot of stuff coming into us because we do offer a service that people tend to need. Um, and they like to work with people who have a good reference or referral from somebody they know
Mhm.
and trust. So,
Exactly. Referrals are the probably one of the biggest pieces for my freelancing success, but also in general, it's like it's social proof. It's the
mhm,
most direct social proof that you can have
yeah,
because you're gonna, take the advice from someone much more than someone you see on online or that you
yeah,
see, in a crappy infomercial or something
right,
like that, right?
right.
So it's definitely very important. I'm curious, what are like the typical clients that you guys are working with right now? I mean, you mentioned, I believe what fitness and things like that, but what else?
Yeah. Uh, right now, it's all over the place. Since we opened our office, which was kind of the intent. It was a little strategic, but we live in a really small town, a town of about 15,000. And I mean, you drive half an hour and you're in the next town. You drive an hour, you're in the next town the other way. So, I mean, there's not a lot going on around us. Um, and so I'd kind of stayed away from promoting that we were here. I really wanted to create value with our work outside of it. But when we opened the office, the idea was maybe we could open that up to some locale
Hmm.
stuff. So right now we're doing a lot of work for local businesses, food trucks, event spaces, properties, and by properties I mean like properties that have multiple businesses on them
Hmm.
that want to brand as one singular unit. We've got a couple different projects with a couple apparel projects for local businesses. Outside of that, we do a ton in the fitness industry. I would say fitness and sport and health. Um, we've really sown our, like I said, sown our got our web and our vines out there. And but yeah, it's really right now it's all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's from every walk of life. We do a lot of work with startups. I try my best, and Ashley does too, to reach out to people who are starting out who we think might have a smaller scale budget or need kind of that right push to get them,
Hmm.
going. So we're doing a lot of that right now, which I really love because working with startups, a lot of times they're really passionate. Uh,
Yeah.
and if you find the right startup or the right mom and pop or the right person who's maybe evolving their business and they're taking the next step, if you find the ones that value the design process or what it brings to the table for them, those are killer clients. But that's generally the client pool we have right now.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing that I'm actually trying to do right now is actually start doing that. Believe it or not, I'm working right now to start getting back out onto the networking, bandwagon, going to actual events. Now, it's a huge difference now versus when I lived in San Diego, where I live half an hour to 45 minutes away from Atlanta. So we are also in like a smaller town. And so one thing that I want to try and do is to start doing that outreach to kind of build up more of a local
Yeah.
business clientele. Now, that's of course not going to mean, less money, right? Because they're not going to have the giant budgets of
Yep.
Silicon Valley or Austin, Texas,
Right.
or San Diego and everything. But I think the one thing that it can produce, and I maybe you might agree with me on this, is that I feel like it's going to produce a lot of quality portfolio work more so than the work that you do for large scale agents, or sorry, not large scale agencies, large scale startups.
Yeah. I agree. I always balance it between, and again, this might be that small town mentality, but there's a balance between the books, right, and
Hmm.
the I would say the moral, not the moral aspect, but like the feel good aspect of it. Like I've taken a lot of jobs where the money didn't matter, right, and that's some of the best work I've ever done. Because I've always told people like if you've got a budget that's next to nil, but
Hmm.
I'm really excited about what you're doing and I want to do it, like the value to you at X might be the same value to Google at
Yeah.
X, right? It's because somebody just had a meeting with a client yesterday and they said, well, I'm only paying you this much, because I was telling them all about like, well, we're going to dig in, we're going to break this apart, we're going to look into, we'll take a look at some competitors. And she's like, well, I'm only paying you X. And I was like, the work doesn't change just because you're paying me less than some big agency or corporation. Like
Yeah.
it's that would be ridiculous. I do know that that happens out there, but I think that would be ridiculous. But I think too, it's when you take a pay cut. In my mind, it's to build a relationship that hopefully, if I do good work for them and I provide them with quality that helps their business or their brand or their product, if I buy into it as much as they've bought into it and the work promotes it in a successful way, in a high quality way, that's a return, right? That's a
Yeah.
return customer, hopefully. So that's kind of the thought process there for me is, does it get me excited? Is it something I'm willing to come down on? And is it something that I think there's a back end on it as well if we do a good job?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I think even like Aaron Draplin is a big like supporter of stuff like this, where some of his favorite logos he's done was for like $500 for a buddy's hot dog cart, if I remember correctly, and
yeah.
everything. And I think that something that you see a lot more popping up, especially on Twitter, is you see a lot of these people who may or may not be fake freelance gurus. Just had an episode about that. But
Don't
they talk
don't
about
get me
how
started. Don't get me started on that.
oh, we can get started on that. We'll talk a little bit about that a little later. But I love when
Only
people
charge $10,000 for your design work, or you're a failure.
yep, there's another episode shout out right there. But no, one thing that you I've been seeing pop up over and over again is this famous I don't even know who started talking about this, but where you have the like a $500 client, has needs so much more attention
Yeah,
than a $5,000 client or a
yeah,
$10,000 client. And I feel like what it comes down to is it comes down to the relationship
yeah.
that
The
you have
parameters.
with them. Exactly. Like parameters, making sure that you're, stick to scope, stick to your processes and everything like that. Because yes, there could be projects that you take on just because it's a quick 500 bucks and everything, but you have to stick to the process with that. You have to make it clear to the client. Otherwise, yes, they'll keep going because they don't know what the
Yeah,
rules are. They
yeah,
don't have the was the bumpers on the bowling lane
yeah,
and everything up.
yeah.
So
I yeah, I think setting good boundaries, and also being the one who's you want to make sure you're taking on a project that's maybe of limited budget on your own accord. Like, yeah, maybe it's something comes up, and that's something we've done with our kind of sprint projects we've been putting out, where it's maybe it's a quick revenue grab, maybe it's a quick cash flow grab. I get it. It's a terrible economy. Everybody's hurting, and
yeah,
we live in rural America where people are like, this is $10,000 work, but I've only got $1,000, and I'm like, let's go. Like, I think it's understanding the climate you're in, understanding the client you're working for, but also
yeah,
understanding like you need to come into that situation in a position of power, right? Somebody's coming to you for a service. You don't have to bend to their will. You need to make sure that that's something that's like the whole free work thing.
yeah,
I love free work. I think it's great, but it has to be on your own accord. It has to be at your own doing, and you have to be the one in control of the parameters and the boundaries and stuff. So, um,
yeah.
yeah, but design influencers, man, I'm not a big fan.
Yeah, I think that it's also very important too that in that situation, like you said, where this normally would cost $10,000, I'm going to do it for 1,000, is to convey that to the client, because that way, they're not just going to go to their friends like, oh yeah, this only cost me $1,000.
Yeah,
Instead, they're like, this would have cost 10,000, but he gave me, a
yeah,
deal, or he gave me a break because he was really excited
yeah.
about the
We get that a
project.
lot where it's I actually had that happen last year where a job I had done for somebody in 2018.
Hmm.
uh, before the studio, when I was working as kind of the head of brand and the
Yeah.
main brand designer for Copa di Vino, a wine brand company that's out of here in the Dalles. And I was making a pretty good living,
Mhm.
and but doing this, doing at the time Wild Giant out on the side,
Yeah.
the night hustle, if you will. I had a guy come in and want a project, and I did it for him for a couple $100. I was like, sure, I got time. I'll fit it in. I don't. It wasn't something where I was, we were trying to actually, in fact, I was barely working on, side stuff. And I was like,
Yeah.
sure, I'll do it. I think it was like a $600 logo. And then last year, I actually got a friend of his had referred, he's like, my friend sent me over here, and we sent him a couple different package proposals based upon our phone call or our first virtual meeting. And he was like, oh, my buddy said that you only charged him 600. And I was like, yeah, that was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And we were, and I told him why. I was like, this, we're in a different place now. It's a different economy and all that. I mean, just really laid it out there for him in a nice way, but like tried to make sure he understood, like, this is why quotes only last so long. And this is
Yeah.
why each project is different. So
Yeah.
I think it's like you said, there's got to be a good communication back and forth between you and whomever you're working with, or whatever project you're planning on taking on. So
Yeah. Communication is probably like one of the most important parts of any type of client relationship or even potential client. relationship, because sometimes those potential clients, as long as you set them up for success, like if you're too expensive for them and you send them to someone can help them. I've
Mhm.
had potential clients come back and like, what, thank you so much for sending us to this person. We have a bigger project now. We have a bigger budget. Is this something you'd like to work on?
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
it's crazy to see stuff like that.
Yeah, I just had that happen last year where I was in the midst of a project with somebody, and we were doing a rebrand for their fishing lure company, and he was like,
Hmm.
"Hey, side note, my kids' softball league in Portland, their team and league needs some brand work," and I'm like, honestly, I was like, the budget's a little low. I'm already in
Yeah.
the weeds on what we're doing here, a couple other projects. I was like, but I got a guy. And I was like,
Yeah.
if you don't mind, and I always think when you refer somebody, there's always the like, do you mind me referring this project to him? Because there is, sometimes people find you and want what you're doing. So when you're like, hey, let me kick you this way, they're like, ah. And it worked out. He ended up doing a way better job than I could have even fathomed of doing. And yeah, and then
Yeah.
the guy came back for another project. So it's not like we lost a potential client. It was by being open and upfront. Um, we gained a better trust and understanding with that particular person. So
Yeah. Let's you brought this up a little bit ago about your bolt projects.
yeah,
And I recently just started, seeing these projects. They're basically sprint projects. You call them bolt projects,
yeah,
where you basically offer a package deal for, I believe, like one graphic or logo or something like that,
yeah,
one revision in 1 week for a set amount of money.
yep,
Can you kind of talk about like where you came up with the idea for this?
yeah. So it's kind of like the 1-1-1 thing. It's one concept, one revision, 1 week, right? And we did it with both kind of a logo project set and then kind of what we just call graphic. Like that's kind of just the basic nomenclature for people who are uninitiated to what we do. But a graphic I deem as like an illustrative, t-shirt design.
Yeah.
Um, and the idea came up because it's been a rough 2 years. It's
Yeah.
I think 2020. Well, I would say like 18 months, but 2020 was
Mhm.
surprisingly good for because the government pushed a lot of money into the economy, and people were like, "Hey, I want to go. I want to follow through with an idea I had."
Yeah.
So I feel like if you were primed and ready in the design industry, you got a bit of a financial boost in 2020. A lot of people a lot of people were hurting financially, and I'm not
Yeah.
talking against that. I'm just saying for what we're doing. And then last year was like it started to trickle away towards the end of the year or towards the middle of the year. People got really tight with their budgets. And so this year we were just like, what can we do to, multifaceted generate revenue?
Yeah.
What can we do to maybe entice the person with the smaller budget? Also create kind of that excitement and awareness. I think.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of that LTO, that limited time kind of thing in product marketing, where
Hmm.
it's kind of a ploy, kind of a shiny lure. If we're getting inside baseball on it, but we've actually had gotten a lot of projects that I've been really proud of, and I think that we've
Yeah.
worked with clients who are like, "Hey, let's do this again." Or let's do a project bigger scope next time. Or it's led to there's been one where this was a test for us,
Yeah.
to see how we jived. And that client, that person, that those projects that are coming up are going to be pretty big for us. So, the idea was more or less, again, rural America. Ashley and I were talking one night and I said, I feel like a lot of people want to work with us, but are afraid
Mhm.
to ask,
Yeah.
because there's that mysticism in our industry where it's don't let people know your pricing or the whole what's it cost and what's your budget. And I feel like a lot of times people don't want to go through that process. If you give them a menu, I guess, with an item, they're either going to think, well, you're cheap, or they're like, hey, this is my chance. And I think that's uh, worked out for us. Is people have come to it with, hey, we've been wanting to work with you. And a lot of these, I think, out of the 10 spots we've opened, 8 of them have said we've been wanting to work with you.
Yeah.
And so it was like, then it worked. We gave people an opportunity to kind of know exactly what they were getting into right before they agreed to getting into it, and that seems to be a big thing. I mean, I've also had a lot of designers reach out and be like, "How's this working for you? What's the response?" And and is it something I should implement? And I'm not an expert. I'm not a guru. I'm not an influencer. I'm, you know,
You heard it first. The course is coming soon. He's
yeah,
going to be selling for $10,000 a course.
yeah, right.
Um,
I'll be speaking at the events and here, and here.
yeah,
In sprint projects, there's nothing new, right?
yeah,
I just think for what we're doing, it's people want to, like I said, people of limited budget and limited scope, or sometimes people are like, hey, I want to do this, but I need to have it done in a certain amount of time. They're afraid to reach out to people. So when you tell them, hey, we'll get it done in a week, they're like,
yeah,
oh, let's do it. So it came up out of need, and from in multiple different on multiple different fronts. So
yeah. So can you talk about, so when you were talking about like limited time, like limited spaces and stuff like that, can you go a little bit deeper into that? Like how
yeah,
many like spaces, what's the period of time and everything?
yeah. So as far as limited spaces, we open up the Bolt because everything's got to be branded. We call them Bolt projects.
Mhm.
We open up limited spaces based on what our schedule allows, because oftentimes when you have bigger projects, those projects have dead periods,
Yeah.
a lot of dead periods, and so do the payments have dead periods too. So we've thought during these dead periods where we're in limbo with certain projects, let's open up some spots. Let's keep the creative rhythm going, and maybe that will help us when these other projects come back up, or when they come alive again. We'll have that creative juice still going. We won't kind of have this
Mhm.
lull where we're just twiddling our thumbs trying to figure out how to be motivated. And so we open up spots based upon our schedule,
Mhm.
because I do have two kids and
Yeah.
two dogs, and I'm not about to let Ashley handle that on her own all the time. So, you know, and when we first did it in June, it was 5 spots. This month has been 5. I don't know if we'll do it in August,
Yeah.
but as it comes, we'll open spots that we feel like we can manage. And then yeah, it's a 7-dayer, and it's the only project that we do that goes over the weekend.
Yeah.
I've been sending out final drafts and final reviews or first reviews over the weekend, which has been weird, but it's also been kind of fun because I've been able to, especially with the heavy illustration stuff. My daughter has an iPad, so I've actually been like kicking stuff to her while I'm working on it. I'm like, hey, color this for me. Or, and actually one of them, she came up with a couple ideas, and I was like, she's 8.5. And I was like, I'm going to use that. So it's something I've found a way to kind of integrate, some family time into, but, yeah, so it's just as project and schedule allows. And then, we try to get, I mean, when I say 7 days, it's not like, hey, it's 7 days. It's like, we're going to get this
Yeah.
done. You're going to see something pretty fast. We tell people you got to be clear. There should be no question. Like when we talk to you about what you're looking for and the concept we're going to send, I want to get through, all the crap. I want to make sure it's as buttoned up and as tight as possible. It's not like, well, I'm thinking maybe this plus this. Is like, no, what are you thinking? Because what I'm going to turn around to you, it's not going to be what you're going to get, but we don't want to have to start over. So,
Yeah.
um, but it's a pretty smooth process, actually. I find when people, it's like I'm the ultimate procrastinator. And I always tell people it's funny. And I actually read a study about this that procrastinators tend to do better work because they don't have time for all of the other what ifs or all the other stuff.
Yeah.
It's all, 100% focused all in. And a lot of those other things kind of go by the wayside. And I found a lot of that happens in these projects. People are like, okay, this is what I'm going for. This is what I need. This is what I want it to look like, instead of there's not a lot of hemming and hawing. So, surprisingly, they've gone really well and been really smooth. And I think everybody we've done work for with them has been really happy. So,
Yeah. So are you doing them all at once, or are you like scheduling them out where, oh, I'm
yeah.
doing 2 this week, 2 next week and everything?
So, Ashley, says I'm terrible about scheduling. She's great at scheduling projects, but I'm terrible. I want to
I
get
need to
going
get my
on
wife
projects.
involved.
As soon as somebody signs our statement of work and pays it, kind of the deposit to have it done, like my mind's on it.
Yeah.
My ADHD is a killer for me in that
Yep.
way. Um, but what I try to do is I try to put one, like I'll start one on Monday, depending on if all 5 slots get filled up for a month and they all come in at the same time. Like I'll try one on Monday and one on Thursday, and I'll try to space them out that way. I'm starting one about the time that I should have sent a first look on another one.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that way I can kind of flip it over. But again, it really depends on. I also try to be really close to what somebody's maybe timeline is. A lot of these have actually had timelines for the client as well. So, if they're like, "Hey, we're going to print on a shirt graphic," it's like, "Okay, well, I'll get started on it now." You just we just try to play volleyball a little bit with what they need and what their schedules are. So,
Yeah, and when they actually have their own internal deadline, then it actually helps, right? Because then they really do cut out all the BS.
yep,
They focus specifically on, what needs to get done. They're quick to give the feedback, quick to sign off, and everything like that.
yep.
Um, I'm curious, and you can totally say that you're not comfortable talking about this and everything, but what do like the returns look like on these projects? I know that you alluded to the fact that some people are coming back, some people are going for bigger projects, but could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, one a couple of these have actually been returning clients who were like,
Yeah.
"Hey, I've been, you've been on our mind, but for whatever reason, and then we saw this, and it's like that top of mind thing again." As far as returns, um, I feel like goodwill has been the biggest one. I feel like it's given, there's a lot of positive afterward as far as clients and um, people tend to be really happy, which is kind of makes my day more than a good check, even though a check pays the bills.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
you know,
definitely.
I would say, yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I am comfortable, but I would say my view on what good return is might be different. I guess business wise, it's a positive experience for the client, and the when we hand something over, it's a lot of these have been hell yeah, we're this was amazing, this was fantastic, I want to do this again, or I'm so glad we finally got to work together, and that just means a lot more to me because um, I think we all just feel like we need to be patted on the back, but I'm not somebody who's going to do it to myself. So I feel like when we do a good job as a studio, and somebody's excited about getting our work from us, or somebody's excited that they finally got to work with us, or they're just stoked on how something came out, or are excited about putting it out into the world. That's the return I hope for, because we all have those projects and clients who are like, it's just a check, or it's
Mhm.
just a payment. But yeah, there's been a couple of them that have been, there's the potential for more projects, and there's also, we've locked one in for a branding project. So, you've taken a $300 graphic and turned it into a 5-figure, project. Like that's a pretty good return on, in my opinion. So
Oh yeah. Has there been any negative things happening or anything like that?
only from other designers.
What is it? Is this like that you're doing it too cheap, or
Yeah,
like what is it?
we're devaluing the industry as if we're Fiverr or something.
No, no, not at
And
all.
to me, it's just like it's a you're bummed you didn't think about it,
Exactly.
and B, you probably don't like us to begin with. So it's just another reason. And I don't. I mean, it's not like I'm out there trying to make enemies in the industry, but we do tend to have a lot of that in our industry, sadly. Um, but yeah, just it's been from other designers. No negative feedback on the process or the final outcome from anybody we've worked with. But yeah, so the only negativity has been you're devaluing the industry, you're devaluing this particular genre of what we're doing, and I'm like, you know, um, bummer.
Yeah.
Bummer for you, I guess. I'm not Elon Musk out there asking people to make new logos for my billion-dollar platform for free. So,
Don't get me started on that.
I think when something comes from a genuine place, like, I'm being open and honest. Like it's a revenue generator for us, and it's an opportunity for us to lower our budget and open ourselves up to allow people who maybe are afraid to ask because they think we're outside of their budget. Um,
Yeah.
I don't think that there's anything bad about that. But if somebody thinks that we're devaluing the industry, it's because they're probably charging too much, or they're not marketing themselves well enough, or whatever it may be. So, or
Yeah.
they're a design guru again who thinks that everything should be six-figure projects. So,
Yeah, I mean, like this also. I feel like when I first heard about what you were doing, because I was one of those same people that reached out to you, like, hey, tell me more about this. This seems like kind of interesting and everything. And it's kind of like to me similar, but way different to like the design subscriptions that you're now seeing
yeah,
everyone jumping
yeah,
on. The difference here is that you are focusing on a one-off project,
yeah,
and that one-off project could easily create like a couple of Instagram posts for you or some
yeah,
other content and stuff like that. And instead of trying to lock in a client to a gym model membership, that's what it is.
yeah,
I'll be honest with you, I am debating testing, a design subscription with
yeah.
like two or three seats, but honestly, I would actually test out your model before that because I feel like it is perfect for downturns. When there's not any client work coming in, where you kind of just need like an extra money, to help make your mortgage payment or to pay
Or your
your
engine
editor
burns
for your
out. Yeah, I
podcast.
mean, there's all sorts of things that come up that.
Exactly, right? It's something that you can jump on and do, but it also could possibly foster some really nice relationships with people and everything.
Yeah,
Versus with the design subscription model, I feel like there's so many holes that it's just going to just sink,
yeah,
and everything like that. So let's actually talk about this because you kind of said this earlier, but you very recently went through in the last like I think what 6 months or so went through a complete rebrand from Wild Giant Studios to Deadbolt Designs. Can you kind of talk about like why you decided to change your studio to a new brand and basically kind of like a new persona, kind of?
yeah. So authenticity, I think, is the big one. Also, I got sick of being asked or being called the wild giant. I am neither wild nor a giant. The root of what wild giant was it came up in a time where I was jobless and I was failing at. I wasn't okay. So failing, implies trying. um, I wasn't putting myself out there very well. I wasn't. I was trying. I was stumbling around trying to find my footing. I was unemployed. I had a really bad experience at my previous job.
Mhm.
It was a time in my life I put on a ton of weight. I was depressed, and Ashley and all of her amazing foresight was like, hey, we had a room before we had our son. We 3-bedroom house. We had one room was kind of the office, and she was like, there's too much of you're trying to I was designing for Instagram because I was trying to get stuff brought in, and she said, stop trying to please other people, please yourself with your design work, right?
Yeah.
You hear that all the time, do the work you want to be hired for. And I said, yeah, I was so burnout, you know. And
Yeah.
he said, my daughter loved to draw, still does. She was, loved to paint. My wife, does a lot of wood burning and crafting stuff. She's like, let's turn the office into a family art room.
Mhm.
And our daughter, liked the name Wild Giant. She was 3 years old. So we were like, yeah, we'll call our art room Wild Giant Studio. And that was kind of the name for it, just lovingly. And I started an Instagram account where I could post our family artwork stuff we were doing.
Mhm.
I love to draw. So it was a little bit more fine art than logo work. And because God forbid you make the algorithm mad or post something that somebody who's followed you doesn't like.
Yeah.
And so when my freelance work picked up again, I was like, okay, there's the internal struggle. Do I work under my name or do I work under a pseudonym or brand name? And so Ash was like, well, Wild Giant's already kind of a thing. Why don't you just steal that Instagram handle and just run with that? So it was really a quick decision. And I kind of used it as an opportunity to play with my branding ability. So Wild Giant was very chameleon esque.
Mhm.
But then during the COVID lockdown, we were at the beach and I was trying to draw the Wild Giant logo on the beach with a stick in the sand, and I couldn't do it. And so, we set out to I was like, let's actually brand this thing.
Yeah.
It has been kind of this Rolling Stone brand for a while, kind of the whole Lincoln Design model where it was like, we don't have a set
Exactly.
logo.
Yep.
And I was like, no, that's not me. That's not what I tell clients. That's, it's not, that's not authentic. So designed the WG monogram, which is one of my favorite logos of all time. And then we kind of brought in this monster green, neon green thing.
Yep.
And it started to gain it started to kind of steamroll in authenticity. The problem was we loved the WG logo, we loved the monster green, but the name Wild Giant was starting to not fit.
Yeah.
And so in December, actually November, Ashley and I were talking about, merch and all this stuff the designers feel like they need to do. I need to put out patches and enamel pins and all that kind of stuff. And I said, I feel like I'm not talking to people who love the same things I do, which is obviously monsters and old movies and Halloween and fun, spooky stuff. And when I try to share that on Wild Giant's account, it just gets murdered, and our account, and
Yeah.
our business account suffers. So how do I do something that respects that and the other thing? And so we started Monster by Design, um, which completely reinvigorated both of us, right?
Yep.
And so the conversation then started: should we audit Wild Giant? I know it's a long-winded answer, but I don't want people to think these things happen flippantly, like they're just a hey, let's change a handle and an avatar picture or whatever. We had real problems with Wild Giant in the sense of every conversation I had with a new client is, what does it mean? Who is it? Is it Bigfoot? And so we were doing by last, I would say the last year and a half, I feel like we were really coming into our own with, like you said, the persona we were putting out there, the brand. Um, and the name just kind of started to feel less and less authentic to what we were doing. And so we started just running with ideas. And I was like, how do we pay homage to all this stuff and
Yep.
use a word that people aren't going to ask us about? Right. So one of the original ideas and concepts was like, I think it was, bolt, like bolt head or bolt neck or neck bolts. Like we were just trying to find things that people connected with. And I was like, well, I was literally looking at the door and I was like, Deadbolt. And I was like, that's great. And I texted it to Ashley and she was like, that's it.
Yep.
And, as stupid as that sounds, it was like, no, it works for what we're doing here. It's a great homage to this. And because in the book, Mary Shelley's book, she talks about the heavenly ray from the sky, which is a lightning bolt, bringing the dead to life. So it's like you have that, the deadbolt, and again, it's not something people have to figure out how to say. Like they say it all the time.
Exactly.
It just, I feel more, actually, we were just talking about it last night. I was like, I don't feel like we have to change anything for the first time in years. I feel
Yeah.
like we've kind of ticked all the boxes that were kind of these sticking points for me. But there were things that came up that I didn't think about would come up for a company for a design business that's 5 years old. Like taxes, LLC issues, bank issues, all sorts of stuff, EIN problems. So if you are thinking about changing your company name, Wild Giant Studio is still our LLC because we, have yet to change that over. So,
Which is fine. You don't have to necessarily have everything match.
right.
You
I think,
know.
we will change it. We came up with a name we felt was really good for all of the stuff we're doing. But, it's just stuff you don't think about when you're a designer and you're doing stuff for yourself. You're thinking creatively only. You're thinking about the touch points. You're thinking about the forward facing stuff.
Yep.
Um, and if you don't have a good business acumen, or you haven't been doing it long enough, or you're like me and you get lost in the weeds sometimes creatively, there are things that come up where you're like, oh no, I probably should have put some more thought into that. But it's nothing that deterred us or was a really big problem. But I would say it's a good PSA for anybody who's like, my design business the name's just not working. Consider all the avenues that you're going to have to deal with and go through before. But Deadbolt came up. It felt less singular. Wild Giant felt very singular in the name. I think that's
Yeah.
why I got asked a lot of times. It was said, "Hey, we're going to have the Wild Giant on the podcast," or Kyle Wild Giant. Deadbolt doesn't feel singular. It feels like it's its own thing. So
Yeah. No, trust me, I understand that, especially with Blue Cyclops, right? My design studio's name. It's something where people would always ask, what is Blue Cyclops? Like, where does that come from? But see, with me, there's a very like deep seated, meaningful story where it's
Yeah.
like, when I was a kid, I had an imaginary friend who was a Blue Cyclops, named Bob, and over time, I forgot that I had that character and everything, and I started creating this Cyclops character in my sketches and doodles years and years later, to the point where I started making him my avatar, my logo, and then all of a sudden one day I remembered, oh my god, I finally remember where he comes from. I had a dream that brought it back and everything.
Yeah.
And so like I had friends who, are very, big on business. They were saying, I don't think you should go by Blue Cyclops. I think you should go by Rocky. And I was like, well, you know what? There's a really deep story with this. I think I'm going to go with that,
Yeah.
you know?
Plus
So,
Rocky, it's not like it's not the name of one of the most successful movie franchises of all time.
exactly. Yeah. I mean, like it
Think about. I mean, it's what you're at play with. When we were Wild Giant, there was an IP issue. Like
really,
somebody in Australia, well after we had been established, was starting to use our name and a version of a logo that we had designed previously because we were doing that kind of that rotating thing,
yeah,
and I had to battle them, and we weren't able to trademark anything because of this issue, and so. That was another thing. Like, and with what you were, with what you're doing, it's if you're able to tell that story and you're able to kind of bring people in to on a personal level, they stop thinking it stops being an off-putting thing. And the name of your business, yeah, I say this all the time. So sorry if you've listened to me on a podcast before, but like you don't want somebody to pick up the phone and call Butthole Inc. You don't want somebody to be, you don't want the creative director of SpaceX to be sitting with Elon Musk or to be, sitting in front of Tim Cook at Apple and be like, we worked with Yo Mama Design Company on this. You want to have something that it doesn't have to be super professional and sterile, but it
yeah,
also shouldn't like make you sound bad when you're not in the room to defend yourself. So, if you can tell a story on a personal level or like us, there's some authenticity there that you can kind of weave into it.
yeah,
Um, it's like Aaron Draplin talks all the time about why he calls the DDC the DDC. It was because it was funny to him that he was the only guy in a business that he called company. Like it was, this joke, kind of this, finger on the nose joke to designers who, say we when they talk about their business, and it's just them. So
yeah,
if you can explain yourself in a way that makes sense or isn't hiding the secret sauce, then I don't think it's that big of a deal. People, it was hard to explain. No, I'm not the wild giant. It's something my daughter named. Why'd she name it that? Well, because we were trying to figure out fun words and names when she was 3. It's just it's more exhausting than it needed to be. So now
yeah,
people ask, and I'm like, it's a Frankenstein reference. So
yeah. Yeah, no, I think that this actually is a great segue too, because like one of the questions that I get quite often, and you probably have also heard this too, is whether especially freelancers and young designers, should they be working under their name, or should they create a brand or a studio? Like with you with Deadbolt, with me with Blue Cyclops.
yeah.
What are your thoughts there overall? I mean, we both have these studios, these names, brands, and everything, but what do you think for like the regular average designer out there?
Oof. So my name. So the reason I decided to go with a brand was because I had a sample size of people not giving. Sorry if this is a PG podcast, but people not giving a shit about who I am. You know,
Yeah,
I felt like, especially when you grow up in a small town and like the way people perceive your parents kind of then trickles down, or your siblings kind of trickles down upon your reputation. I was like, I just don't think working under my name, I don't think people care. I
yeah,
felt like I wanted to hide behind something a little bit. I wanted to put something out there. So for me, it was kind of that, again, that extroverted introvert thing where I could kind of put up a shield, a little bit. In today's, I do see a lot of people nowadays having success with a big one right now is Christy at Pink Pony Creative in New Zealand. She's blown up, but her personal account has blown up. She's also got a studio brand. Um, so I think for in some ways it's like, and I think you can kind of attest to this too because you have your own personal that you share your work on, but then you also have your studio one or your podcast one.
Yep.
You're building a following of engagement or building engagement and then letting it seep over into the other ventures, right?
Yep.
Whereas that wasn't working for me. So the venture then was, I liken it to, and again, sorry, I always tell people on podcasts, like if you're going to listen to one with me on, it's going to be a ramble.
No worries.
Because things in my brain are like, oh hey, here over here. I grew up a big wrestling fan, and so I always likened our studio brand to a wrestling gimmick. You know, Deadbolt is The Rock, whereas I'm Dwayne Johnson. No, I'm not Dwayne Johnson. I wish I was, but
Everybody
that's
does.
kind of the key. It's like it's the man behind the mask, the don't look at the guy behind the curtain kind of thing. Um, we were able to talk differently. I'm able to put things now. I'm able to imbue some of my personality into the brand. But I would say, if you're shy, that might be the way to go. If you feel like you don't like putting yourself out there, maybe hiding behind a pseudonym is the way to go. But also, it has to feel authentic to what you're doing. You can't have something you don't want to have to put out there. All this awesome fire and all this stuff, and then have somebody talk to you and have you be like really mouseish and impish, and like you don't that's not gonna work out for you in the long run. But I don't know. Like, I really think you got to have a sample size. I think
Yeah.
any advice I would give on that is figure out, what's going to work, but also give things time to work or not work. That's something I didn't do. I always, for fun, would put out these like, hey, look how often our logo changed over the years, or look how, and like the first like so many years of my design career, there's like 10 different names, studio names or brand names. And then I
Yeah.
ran with my name for a while, and then it was Wild Giant. So it's, try stuff, figure out what works and doesn't work. But if you do have something that's authentic, like you said, like Cyclops, like run with it, tell
Yeah.
that story, tell how it relates to you, and people will gravitate towards it.
Yeah. And I think though also like if people were to follow like you don't necessarily have to have a one specific logo, right? You can have especially with those who decide to go the studio route where they, have a name and a brand and everything. I think it's fine to follow the Lincoln Design Company, process where they probably have like what 500 logos at this point.
Yeah,
Like it's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
But the thing is that it is perfect
Hmm.
because they can then go and create all these different versions of their logo showcasing what they can do
Yep.
without anyone saying that, oh, that's a fake project,
Yeah.
oh, that's not a real project,
No, yeah, they're
that's a
using it.
real
It's an
project.
asset. They're using it
Exactly.
in a branded way. I think, to speak to that, I think also, not to, you know, talk about Lincoln too much.
Yeah.
But I love their work, and they're super hot right now. And they have been for a long time. But they've got like 5 or 6 or 7 of the world, some of the world's best illustrators on their staff. I mean, they've got a world class team. So being able to kind of mix up what they're doing as far as brand wise, it almost makes sense because they are a brand house of so much talent and different styles underneath that
Yeah.
umbrella that showcasing that within their branding makes sense for what they're doing. Then you have again Aaron, who's had the same DDC logo since like 2004. Um, you know, I like kind of that blend, right? Like, I like having a set look or a set
Yeah.
identity or a set mark, but then I like playing with everything underneath it. I feel like I tell people all the time, like your brand should be a living thing. Um, if a brand was a monster, so to speak, your logo, the main logo, or whatever, can be the face, but
Yeah.
everything that happens underneath it to make it walk, to make it move, to make it talk, like that can be expressive. Have fun with it. And I think that's one thing Lincoln has done really well because right now I think they've had the same logo or the same monogram or whatever going on for a couple of years now. But every time they put their logo out there or on an advertising or on a sponsorship, it's one of those other assets. But it's
Yeah.
still Lincoln Design Co. So if
Yeah.
you can build that into what you're doing, I think as far as like a studio or a brand or whatever, a design brand, it makes a lot of sense because you do want to show your capabilities to people when you aren't working. So the best way to do that is to do it through yourself. And how you separate that from being a fake project is put it into use. We
Yeah.
make stickers and patches and signs of stuff of all the different little assets we have, or use them in your website. Make it part of how the brand lives and breathes. Or just show somebody like on a Behance page, like, hey, this is our brand, but like this is all the stuff we've built within into it, and how we've, you know, it's grown beyond. It's kind of this mushroom cloud of, this is where it started and this is what it's become. I think that there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I would probably say if you're going to go the brand route, that's probably what you should do
Exactly.
until you get to a point where I think there is a threshold where you're like, okay, maybe I can become more staff. Maybe I can, button that up a little bit more. Um, or you're like us where you're like, you accidentally find the right logo in all of those
Oh, yeah.
little playful things. It's again, it's kind of goes back to that. You got to try things and find what works. Um, because it's always it's sample sizes and it's trial and error and everything. Um, I don't feel like sometimes I feel like the design, art maybe too. It's very stuffy and very rigid, and there's all these perceived set of rules. Um, and a lot of times, if you break the rules, you get called, like with our Bolt projects. There are no rules. Do whatever the hell you want. Do what makes you happy. You'll find that if you're trying to do this to make money, you'll find, oh, maybe I should dial that back, or maybe I
Yeah.
should turn that up. But again, you kind of got to go through the motions and figure out what that is.
Yeah, there's so many different ways to basically do anything, right? The famous adage is there's, so many different ways to skin a cat.
Yep.
My wife, the first time I told her that, she was like, "Who says that?" And then she starts seeing it pop up everywhere. She's like, "Okay, I understand."
Yep. Yep.
But yeah, I mean, there's no secret sauce. There's no golden ticket. There's no like specific way of doing things. It's what works for you. It's what, works for your brand, for your business.
Yeah.
Like you're going to do things way differently than other people are going to do.
It's the
And
whole magician thing. They're all doing the same
yeah,
tricks. It's the showmanship that sells it, right?
exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I feel really passionate about doing your own thing and finding authenticity in what you're doing. Like I think because am a good study on failing at trying to do what everybody else has done, and then finding something that worked for yourself. And I know there's probably a young designer out there who's going to listen to this and be like, "That's easy for you to say," but it's not easy for me to say because there was a lot of really low lows involved with that. So, yeah, I really feel like you got to try stuff. If you see
Oh
somebody
yeah.
you like, I told my daughter, she's like, "How do I learn how to draw a face?" And I said, "Trace it." And she goes, "Dad." She was like, "Oh no." And I was like, "You're not selling the work for you're not telling people you did it. You're not telling, like,
Yep.
figure it out. Like, learn what eyeballs are supposed to look like. Learn how a nose should, be shaped or placed on a face. Like, take what you're learning in that instance. And same thing with designers. Like, if you really like a logo, put it into Illustrator and deconstruct the hell out of it, and
Yes.
then put it back
I,
together in the way that you would do it, because the secret sauce is not being a designer, because good Lord, there's a ton of them. And
oh yeah.
we live in a world where everything's interconnected by the internet now. There are people out there called self designers, and they shouldn't. But
Yep.
people have access to Adobe through subscription. Like, your grandma could be a designer now.
Yeah.
The secret, the secret, or the secret sauce, or the magic trick, is really how you do it, how you use your process working with a client, you know, um, how you go. Like, I have this conversation all the time with, my buddy Dan Blessing, a design shark. And I'm like, are you going to deal with that little thing? And he's like, yeah, I'm going to do it this way. And I'm like, why are you doing it that way? And it's like, this is the way I've developed doing it. And I'm like, I've learned something new,
Yeah.
because I do it differently. That's the sweet spot. That's the secret to the job. And so again, it's same thing with your brand. Like, if you dig what Lincoln's doing, or you dig what, like me, I'm a huge Invisible Creature stan. Like, I mean, beyond, and Brave the Woods. Like I tried to emulate what they were doing so much and what we were
Yep.
doing early with Wild Giant.
Same here.
And then it was like through that process, I really found, again, go back to that authenticity thing. I really found that voice by emulating those things. So find somebody you really, really look up to and what they're doing well, or you perceive they're doing well, and emulate it and find a way to kind of put your own spin on it in a way that isn't copying, but is, an organic, and personal thing.
Yeah. Big shout out to Dan Blessing, Design Shark. He actually, we just recorded last week his guest podcast episode, so he's getting like double shout outs right
Is
now.
my check better be in the mail? Uh, no,
Exactly.
Dan and I've been friends for a long time. He actually, when I was first putting out work on Instagram, was one of the first designers to follow me. So we've been friends. I always joke the digital pen tool thing, or pen pals, pen tool.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Digital pen pal thing, where we've been friends for probably going on like 10 or 11 years, but have never met in person. So we talk every day. But that's, again, hey, designers, make friends. It doesn't hurt to make friends in your industry. Don't be territorial.
Yeah, you guys should both go to Creative South next year. Then you guys can actually meet in person.
I just had a phone call with Mike Jones the other day, and he's been hammering me about going. And I'm like, man, I want to really bad. It's just every time it comes around, something comes up, and I
Something
can't make it.
happens.
But yeah, no, I definitely think that's Creative South's high on the list. I know Into the Woods is here this next week, and so I mean, it's just, yeah, get out there and network and make friends. Even if you only, you know, if you make one friend in the design industry, by proxy, you're now friends with who they're friends with. So
Exactly.
it's great to, again, that networking thing, put yourself out there a little bit. And,
Yeah.
for me, it's been a huge benefit to my career.
Yeah. So, we're over the 1 hour mark, so I do apologize, taking away from all the
I'm
people.
sorry. I'm sorry to you and the people listening.
Oh, trust me, I am pretty sure that everyone listening is definitely not upset about hearing you talk. So for those out there, what are where can they find you and everything like that? Is there anything also that you want to give a shout out to that you're currently working on that you
Yeah.
want some extra publicity for?
That's the old Hot Ones ending, here
Yeah,
kind
right.
of thing, right?
Trying to get it right. I'm not there yet, but I'm getting close.
If you start doing spicy wings, I'm coming back. Yeah, so you can find us at We Are Deadbolt on all social media platforms. Facebook finally allowed us to use the word dead, so we have a Facebook page. Not that anybody uses Facebook besides your crazy uncle and your grandmother anymore, but you can find us on all socials under We Are Deadbolt, and then we are at deadboltdesign.com. If you feel so inclined to, read my snarky tweets and my terrible sports opinions, and you can follow, my Twitter is at KyleVC. But shout outs, oh man, follow Not Dead Yet. We work really hard with Matt and the crew at that brand. We really believe in what Matt, is putting out there, the message that, we only get, this one life.
Yep.
And whether you're into fitness or you're into, psychology or anything, like there's,
Stoicism probably too.
yeah, actually, exactly. Matt has this mindset and this teaching about, he calls it the 16-12 mindset. And his dad died when he was 31. He was 31. His dad was 62. So half, they were, half of each other's
Yeah.
age, or he was half his dad's age. And he figured, well, if I die when my dad did, I've got 1,612 weeks to live.
Wow.
End of every week, he throws a marble in the garbage. It's like, whether that week counted or not, whether it was a good week or not. So, it's this whole mindset of like, make these things count. Like,
Yeah.
if you're into fitness, make your this engine that you have as good as possible. If you're into art, like try to push if you have a dream, push that dream. So I would say if that speaks to you, then in Not Dead Yet's a shameless plug because it'll keep us, it's job security, but we really believe in what Matt's doing and that brand. So I would say give that a follow if you're so inclined. But yeah, I mean, I'm really big on. I follow a ton of illustrators, and a ton of people who are in like the prop business in Hollywood, and small time artists who are trying to make a go and stuff like that. So there's so many people I'd love to shout out, but they don't really need my promotion.
Yeah.
But yeah, follow Dan Design Shark.
Yep.
In my opinion, the best in the game right now in the avenue of sports design. And I'm not just saying that because he's a good friend. I really believe that. I feel like sports design has really kind of been. There's only a couple design houses that really deal with that, and a bunch of freelancers. But Dan's really top of
Yeah.
game right now. So go give him a follow at Design Shark. But yeah, man, I'm big on this industry and this community doing as well as it can. So if I forgot somebody that I'm friends with, I'm sorry.
You forgot your wife.
Well, she gets enough thank yous, but I always tell people they're like, so what's the ratio of like who does what? And I said I get all the credit and I do the fun stuff. Ashley's the one that keeps the lights on and is the heart and soul of the operation. So um, she's the heart and soul of our family too. So yeah,
Yeah.
she deserves all the credit, but sometimes I like to not give it to her because I like the soapbox for myself.
Yeah, if I could get my wife involved in the business, that would be great. We just decided that she was going to be a stay-at-home mom for the next
Oh,
few years because we just had our son a couple
congratulations.
months ago. Thank you so much. So it's like, I would love to get her involved.
Yeah.
Will that ever happen? I have no idea. She'll listen to me, but she like has no interest in getting involved, I don't think. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah, Ashley didn't really either until and then we started doing the Monster by Design thing with the merch and all that stuff, and she took that over, and it's really kind of changed the way that she views both businesses. So that's been really helpful. But man, that's a podcast in and of itself. Being a parent and a business owner or a designer, when you have kids, it changes the way you think about things and the way you do things. So being able to bring family into it, they say don't work with family, but I find this was always where I was going to end up. It was always my goal. I was always, open with my wife about that. Even before we got married, I was like, hey, by the time I'm 30, I want to be my own boss. And so I think just they, by process elimination, they just buy into it as well, or they're like they just, if you find somebody who's the right support system, then yeah, that's a benefit for sure.
Yeah. Stay tuned for part 2 of Kyle Van Cleave on parenting and business. Uh,
My TED talk.
but I have one last question. This probably might be even be opening a can of worms.
Oh God.
But what is your favorite Frankenstein related movie?
Oh, related movie. Oh, well,
Doesn't have to be a straight Frankenstein
There,
movie. It can
there's
be anything
there's
different.
Alvin and the Chipmunks meet Frankenstein. That's a good one. I think that's one of my earliest memories relating to Universal monsters.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, my favorite Frankenstein movie is Son of Frankenstein. Um, my second, I mean, the best movie to ever have Frankenstein involved in any way, shape, or form, whether by name, is Young Frankenstein. To me, that's one
Yep.
of the top 5 greatest movies ever made. Might even be one of the might yeah it's a phenomenal film, and if you haven't seen it, you're a loser. uh, but I would say Young Son of Frankenstein, which Young Frankenstein is kind of a parody of, is great. um, but I have really come to love, because I watched it for the first time, which is crazy, growing up as a kid in the 90s. But I watched it for the first time with my daughter a couple of years ago with Monster Squad,
Yes,
from
I
the
was actually just about to bring that up.
to me is probably the best portrayal of the monster ever.
Yeah.
Because it takes that humanization thing about them. Yeah, that's a whole can of worms. But yeah, Monster Squad's a really good. Anytime that they make the monster into kind of this lovable doof, which is
Yeah.
kind of what the portrayal is supposed to be in the original movie. Now, not in the book. In the book, he's like a super genius, superhuman. He's kind of a Steve Rogers kind of character,
Yeah.
a murderous Steve Rogers. But the original intent of like the Boris Karloff version was like it's this person that doesn't want to that was dead, didn't ask to be brought back to life, and is misunderstood. So I think Monster Squad, if you're looking for a good interpretation of the Frankenstein monster, then Monster Squad's the best way to go.
100%. I might even try and get my wife to watch that
It it
tonight.
literally, we have a big TV in the lobby of the office, and it's on that rotation.
Really?
When people
Okay.
come in or they walk by the front window, there's always something going. Whether it's the Hugh Jackman movie Van Helsing, because I think that's a great one as well,
Yeah.
or Monster
That's
Squad.
definitely one of my favorite monster actual Frankenstein monsters is him because
Yeah,
it actually does feel more original where he is intelligent. He's not, just like a walking around zombie type
yeah,
character.
yeah. Oh yeah. Again, that could be a whole podcast. Yeah, I love that because steampunk was really popular at the time too. So they
Yeah.
integrated a lot of that cyborgish vibe to him. But yeah, that one's a fun one because he's very well spoken and almost operatic in a way. So
Yeah.
that's definitely a fun one. But yeah, I mean, Young Frankenstein is the pinnacle. But there's so much, man. There's so many. There's the De Niro version, which is an interesting movie. Um, yeah, there's the Hammer versions with Christopher Lee from the '50s, which are really good. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I could definitely nerd out on that conversation. But yeah,
I told you, like,
if you're gonna get involved in like a Frankenstein watch list, Young Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Son of Frankenstein, Monster Squad, like that would be the four that I would say
yeah,
alternate yourself to.
yeah. Like I said, opening a can of worms on the last question. No, so I'm gonna go ahead and do my outro
Sure.
right now and everything. All right. Oh God, these allergies are killing me. It's like, oof. All right. Thank you so much, Kyle, for joining us, for, giving us over an hour of your time, to be a part of this podcast episode. I really enjoyed it. I hope you did too. And I know everyone who is watching and listening are also going to enjoy this. If you haven't already, definitely go head on over and follow him on Twitter, on Instagram. Trust me, you will not regret, especially the Instagram. Can't say about the Twitter because, there are some sports related things, and I'm not a sports person whatsoever. I still follow him though because a lot of the stuff he puts out is amazing. For those of you who are still not subscribed to the podcast, please definitely hit that subscribe button on Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to us on YouTube. If you like this video podcast, please hit that like button. Leave comments down below if you have any questions or follow up questions for Kyle. Hopefully, he might answer some questions in some future content. We'll see if we can get him to do that. He's kind of expensive, so I don't know. But thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's episode. We're putting out a whole lot more content. I'm actually working right now on 6 more episodes of the podcast as we speak. And I hopefully will not disappoint you. So, again, please subscribe, like, comment. You know the drill. Always remember, and this is something I always say in every video, always remember to stay passionate, stay positive, and stay creative. Thank you guys so much. And thank you again, Kyle, for joining us. I really appreciate it. All right. Awesome, guys. See you later. Have a great day. Bye. All right. Let's